Good afternoon. It's afternoon here. Welcome to Crossing the Color Line. This is episode number 8, if I'm not mistaken. And I want you to know I'm dressing up a little more for you guys because I want you to like us and subscribe. By the time we get to episode 12, I'll be wearing a tuxedo. Letha's going to introduce our topic for today.
Okay, our topic today, we're going to go back to crossing the color line again. We've talked about Trump enough because I'm sick of Trump. Because Trump will be Trump. Okay? So tonight we're going to, and I have my cheat sheet here. Pat thought that wouldn't be good, but I need it. Why do some people
I'm the
like
one that
us?
forgot our topic. So.
Why do some people like us decide to marry someone of a different ethnic group or a different, in the past it was religious group, or a different racial group?
Sometimes even social class. In some places like England, social class is very
important.
Yeah.
It's very important. So, a question for you is, why do you think, if you will contact us and say why, what are some reasons that you think people do that? Because not everyone does that. And I meant to do some research because people think there are a lot of interracial marriages, and they are not. Considering the 300 million people we have in the United States, interracial marriages, especially between blacks and whites, is still...
It is still, and the one between blacks and whites is, I think, still the lowest. However, what we have to think about, when, again, sorry, get back to Trump, why do so many people think that things are changing so much around them? It is increasing much more than it used to be. For example, when I was dating her, I got a book called Intermarriage. Notice, not interracial marriage, intermarriage. It was all about Baptists marrying Methodists.
Or Catholics.
Catholics marrying Jews or something like that, right?
And Jews marrying other people.
Yeah. One very small thing about interracial marriage, but since those marriages were illegal at the time, it wasn't something they were going to cover except as a real exotic thing. Well, it's no longer so exotic. It's not real common, but we want to look a little bit at why might people choose to do that. And I thought of some people I've known who represent that sort of decision, not necessarily related to our own culture, but looking to give us a little perspective. And I want to go back a little bit, delve into my anthropology background, and remind everyone that when societies were based on a tribal sort of organization, you had two kinds of marriage. You had, to use technical terms, endogamy and exogamy. In some groups, you pick your spouse from within your social group. In other areas, you pick someone deliberately from outside your social group. Now, why that is, I don't know. I've got a bunch of books on theory that I'll be reading in my old age, but anyway. Oh, by the way, I'm 76 now. Before I was 75. I'm 76. So, I think we need to look at the fact that this occurs all over. Now, you want to follow that, or you want me to?
No, you can go ahead and talk
okay.
about.
I want, because I think what I said was that we're going to take a look at the simple fact that in this country. Well, why don't you talk about the fact that in the United States, the issue has always been black and white.
It's always been.
Yeah.
And why do you think that is? That it's always been that the black, quote unquote, race has always been the outside race, even after the Jews and the Italians and people came to this country, and they too were discriminated against. But in 2017, we are still dealing with the fact that if a black, now let me go to white woman brings home a black guy, that usually there is a lot of questioning going on about why you're doing this or why you're not doing that. And in the United States, it's still, black men tend to marry quote unquote, outside of their race more than black women do. And so I look at a lot of the reasons, I think, and doing a little unscientific
maybe
exercises
unscientific,
about that.
but remember, she was a high school counselor, and she dealt with this issue a lot
Mm-hmm.
back in the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
back in the 80s. She dealt with this issue of these little teenage girls, white girls, dating these black guys, blah, blah, blah. So she does have a lot of experience, maybe not academic research, but a lot of experience.
But I know in talking to, for instance, we were in my office one time, and this is in an upper middle class school, and we had an album of Earth, Wind, and Fire, I think, and two of the girls were white, and it was and I think we were the only ones in there, and so I said, one of the other girls said,
For our younger members, Earth, Wind, and Fire is a black music group.
Yes. And one of the white girls had more experience, and she was open to dating anyone, even though she was white. The other girl, and I said, which one of them do you think is attractive? And she said to me, now this was in the mid-70s, and she said, I don't know how to tell if a black guy is good looking. And I stopped. I said, oh my, that's interesting. And the other girl, she said, really? Because she felt like, there were handsome black guys, handsome Mexican guys, handsome white guys, etc., etc. So, but again, that too, blacks and whites dating. And Pat can correct me if I'm wrong, but again, in this country, if you had, quote, one drop of African American blood, you were considered black. Okay? One drop. And the way they knew this a lot of the times is a lot of it was in the South, and people knew each other and all of this.
Yeah. You have to bear that in mind,
Right.
And
go ahead.
I'm going to excuse myself for a second. I want to get the picture.
Okay.
I want to show you guys
He's
something.
going to get a picture that we talk about a lot, and we show it to people a lot. But back to African Americans and whites, and really any other group, because lots of Hispanics do not want their son or daughter to marry black. Asians again have been really particular, but again, black men tend to marry more other ethnic groups or racial groups. Asian women tend to marry white men, and that I'm very specific. Asian women tend to marry white men. Okay?
Are you going to talk about the reactions that you get from mixed couples when they see you?
When they see you and me? Or?
No, when you see them and how they react, how black men react, how white. Okay.
And
we'll get back to it.
Into that.
Because I want to give a little more background. So, first thing I want to do is show you something to give you an idea of this one drop rule that Letha spoke of. The idea was, of course, that if people knew your background, they knew who you were, because people didn't move around back in the day. They didn't move around too much. There were a lot of people that passed. When passing is a specific term meaning to, quote, pass for white. This has been going on, and it's been documented, and there was, in fact, back when I was an anthropology student in the early 60s, anthropologists said, if your ancestors in this country go back more than 3 generations, and you consider yourself a white person, you're part black. The mixture was tremendous, and people often didn't get married and all kinds of things happening. But I want to show you an example. This picture. And I've been told that we really need to find a better way to do this. But all I can do right now is put it up to the camera here. See this couple? Now, my wife's cousin was here a couple weeks ago, and I showed him this picture, which I've done many times to people. Black people always say, because, it's obviously an old-timey thing, right?
Well, not just black people, remember?
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying black people invariably look at this and say, who's the sister? No question, this woman
is a sister.
is what we would call a black woman. Okay?
A mulatto.
Who is she? Yeah.
A mulatto.
Who is she? That's President Dwight David Eisenhower's parents. Okay? Now, I was curious about this because this was from Life magazine. Not a word in the magazine about her being black. Not a word. I was curious, so I looked up biographies of Eisenhower. Turns out, and I won't go into the detail, but you look into her background, where she came from, when, and so forth, who her husband was, you'll get the picture. She left an area where people knew her. She moved out west. She married a guy who had some power in the community. Even if you looked at her and said, by golly, I think that one's a black one, Oh, no, you wouldn't dare say it because this guy had power. And you don't talk about his wife that way. See, those are the things that happened in this country. Now, I want to give you a couple of examples before my wife talks about. Again, I've been criticized many times by many people for being too academic, but you got to know facts, people. And I try to personalize it as much as I can. So I want to give you an example of two people that I got to know. One was a psychologist I worked with, and the other was her husband. She was a Shia Muslim from Pakistan. He was a Sikh. Americans say Sikh, but it's the actual pronunciation is Sikh, but that's beside the point. And they got married. That, in those communities, was really something you didn't do. But then on the other hand, a woman didn't get a PhD in psychology either, right? So, they broke a number of traditions. Who are these people? Very intelligent people, for one thing, I'll have to say. And willing to be iconoclasts. That is, people to take a look at the rules of their societies and say, that's not for me. Not many people do that. We tend to admire them because it takes some courage. So that's an example. Now, another friend, young man, very young man. I met him in high school. He was Muslim.
He was in high school.
The young man was in high school. I was a teacher.
Right.
Okay, I met him, became friends with him, and the friendship went on for years. He got married, had kids, and the whole thing. I mean, if you weren't a Muslim of a particular kind, from a particular family, I mean, the rules were massive. And on top of all that, his mother picked his wife for him.
And she did a great job.
Oh, yeah. The wife is the one wonder. He did, yeah. It's one of those things that you, maybe arranged marriages ain't so bad, It was great. But his criteria, very strictly along religious lines. Now, we know that there is sometimes hostility between, for example, religious groups, not just racial groups. In Yugoslavia, if you are my age or somewhat younger, you remember what happened in Yugoslavia, but you may not know a little bit of the background. In Yugoslavia, you have a number of ethnic groups, Croats and Serbs, Montenegrins, Macedonians, Slovenians, who we know as the First Lady of the United States is from Slovenia. You had all these ethnic groups. You had different religious groups. You had Orthodox Christians, Catholic Christians, you had Muslims, you had Gypsies, that's another ethnic group actually. They all lived together. The Gypsies were pretty much separate, but everyone else lived together, got along together, and intermarried. Their families all intermarried each other. When the hostilities in Yugoslavia broke out, those people turned on each other after several generations of living together in peace and harmony, and slaughtered each other. They didn't just get hostile and separate. Family members turned on each other, killed each other, tortured each other, raped each other. It was really, if you remember that Yugoslav situation, it was just heartbreaking. What the hell happened? So, that is an example. You can't say, well, these people do this and those people do that. Something can come along, and one explanation is economics. The economic situation changed, and people get real, what's the word? Hostile, strict, stern. Now
right.
What am I looking for? They get real upset when they can't feed their families. And if someone comes along and says, it's the fault of those people, we of course have the classic Hitler, the Jews.
And now we have
some people in this country
the
still
immigrants.
Now you have immigrants.
And before
being
that,
blamed.
it was the African Americans, since we were the larger minority at that time.
Okay, so I wanted to set that background to get you to thinking a little bit about how things are in various parts of the world. What we do in this country is not unique by any means, but we have to look at the fact, as my wife said, the black-white issue is really, really strong. Why is that? Why is it stronger than any other? And her cousin, visiting from a small town, said, when he was growing up, boy, the black-white thing, black guys did not dare even look at a white girl, blah, blah, blah. He said, now you can't walk anywhere without stepping on an interracial little kid. That was his expression.
And that kind of segues into the experiment that my daughter and I do when we are walking around. And the black women issue and the white woman issue. Many black guys, in fact, I just saw one today. My daughter-in-law and my granddaughter and I were in IKEA, and there was this handsome, he looked like he was biracial, and his wife was white. And I looked at him, and then he came around, and we were looking at a sofa, and I said something to my granddaughter, and he thought I said something to him, and he kind of looked confused, but he never looked at me. He kept on walking. And that's what happens lots and lots and lots of times. And my daughter and I often will say, okay, we're going to see what's going to happen. And when I talk to other black women, and they say, black guys will not look at you, the white wife, girlfriend will not look at you, they will not acknowledge you other than to say, if they're in a store and he's over on one side and she's over on the other, to let you know that she is with him, she will say, hey, John, look at this. And we say, why in the hell is she calling him? That's to let the black woman know, I'm with that black man. Now, that's what comes across. Now, the other thing is you have white women, and they will sit next to you with these little brown children. They will not talk to you, will not acknowledge you, will not say boo to you, and they got these little chocolate children running around. And these are issues that white women and black men need to look at. And now I've seen a little, as black women marry more white men, I've gotten a little more of that more recently from black women who are with white men. But the preponderance has been white women and black men. it's not and you hear a lot about how angry black women and this and that and the other. Black women get upset, and you would get upset too. Ask any white woman who goes anywhere, and they'll say, "Well, am I going to be the only one?" But yet you expect black women to just kind of bow down and say, "Okay, you are, to me, lording it over that you're with a black man, and he's helping you to do that. Your mama's black, your grandmother's black. So what is the issue, Charles Barkley?" And to say that black women, I'm calling them out, black women has an issue with hygiene. Okay? Who taught white women how to clean their little nasty behinds? Okay? It was black women. Not only did black women nurse them, okay? They were wet nurses, did everything for them.
I don't think our younger audience knows what a wet nurse is.
Oh, they actually nurse the baby
instead of the mother.
On the breast instead of the mothers. Okay? So you have to look at what you think about yourself. And this is where I go. Because if you can't acknowledge black women, and your mama's black, okay, and your children, even though they're biracial, they're considered black, okay? So I'm looking at you and how you tend to treat black women, okay? And then you have the little brown children running around, and their little hair is sticking up every which way, because you don't know any black women to help you with your child's hair. And why is that? Because you don't have any associations with black women.
We're getting a reaction from the amen corner over there.
Okay. So let's, and we probably should go into this because I have a lot to say about this. You see that my husband is white. And like I used to tell the black guys, I don't care who you date. I have never put down black men because I dated white men, Asian men, Colombian men, African men.
You dated a Colombian?
I sure did, and he was so happy. He was so handsome. Yeah, he was handsome.
Didn't know that one.
And so I'm saying, then we'll get into whether or not is it time, Joshua? Whether or not
it's about 3 minutes.
Whether or not it's a choice. If you say, I won't date anybody darker than I am, or I don't date black men, or I don't date white men, or I don't date whichever man it is, but especially in getting into black. So we need to look at that, and maybe the next time we come on, we will talk about that too, because as you can see, I have a lot to say about
I need to elevate the intellectual level of this just for a second to give you an idea. We often are horrified by something in the Muslim world called honor killings.
Yes.
And this is where a woman is found talking to a man outside the family or whatever the situation is. Doesn't even have to be worse than that, just talking to someone. And her own brother, her own father, will murder her. And there have been, not many, but one or two in the United States even.
Yes.
Okay, we're horrified by that. Well, we have our own. We have our own honor killings. When Emmett Till simply whistled at a white girl, mm-hmm. He was tortured and murdered in Mississippi.
At 15 years old.
14, actually.
14.
Yeah, and his mother said, you know what? I want the world to see what those people did to him.
What those animals.
And she had an open casket funeral, and the news showed up, thank goodness, and they showed pictures of this mutilated body, this little boy. And so that was an honor killing. He disrespected white womanhood, blah, blah, blah. So please, people, come down off your high horse about how pure and wonderful the United States is. We have our own issues. It's not that we aren't a great country. We certainly are. We always have been. Screw Donald Trump and make it great again. It's been great all along, except maybe for him.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
well, no, I just wanted to finish by reminding us of how subtle all this stuff is. What my wife is talking about, it's very, very subtle. And to give you a current example from yesterday, day before yesterday, Nancy Pelosi got up and talked about the meeting in the Oval Office with her and Trump and Chuck Schumer and the two Republican leaders, Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. And she said that Chuck Schumer talked New York to Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Trump is from Queens, Schumer's from Brooklyn. They know how to talk to each other in New Yorkese. She was only half joking. Because it's clear that Trump doesn't get this Wisconsin jive from Ryan or this Kentucky drawl from McConnell. He can talk to Chuck, as he calls him now, Chuck and Nancy.
His new best friend.
Yeah, so that's just a simple example of how subtle these ethnic kinds of things are, and then we haven't even covered white people in this country and their attitude toward Africans and West Indians, who are just as black, often blacker in color than African Americans. And we haven't even touched Barack Obama. Was he an African American? I think I did bring it up one time.
Yeah, you did. But we will discuss this again. Why is it that many of you do not know that Dwight Eisenhower's mother was what they called then a mulatto? Why is it that his family, as far as I know, does not talk about her being part black? So we'll discuss this a little bit more.
And go to the library and look up a couple of biographies of Eisenhower, and see where they talk about his mother, and see if you can figure out what happened there, why she's black, why she's not thought of as being black, etc., etc. Little homework. In addition to liking us and subscribing, and please make comments.
Okay.
All right.
I think that was great. Bye.
Bye.